I'm Peter Langland-Hassan. I'm a professor of philosophy here at UC, and I work in the philosophy of mind, the philosophy of cognitive science. Some of the specific topics I work on are imagination, inner speech, memory, abstract thought and its relationship to language, self-knowledge, introspection. So within those things, my work on imagination has involved developing, I guess, what I think of as a reductive account of imagination, where I try to provide what you might think of as a recipe for imagination, how we could build imagination out of things that aren't imagination. And I try to explain how a lot of the things we associate with imagination, things like pretending or hypothetical reasoning or enjoying fictions or being creative, those abilities arise out of the use of other kinds of mental states that aren't imagination, like beliefs, desires of certain kinds of uses of mental imagery that can be understood as beliefs and things like that. And then the work on inner speech, I try to deal with different puzzles about why we bother to talk to ourselves in our heads if we already knew what we were thinking. Is inner speech thought itself, or is it somehow a way of expressing our thoughts to ourselves that makes possible various kinds of metacognitive or self-reflective thoughts? Frankly, I have a lot of puzzles about that, and I'm still sort of working my way through them, but it's a topic that seems to be gaining some steam that I enjoy working on. I've also worked on episodic memory and the relationship between memory and imagination, and I've done some empirical work as well. So in addition to my philosophical work, I've run some sort of experimental psychology studies working with people with aphasia to see how their lack of language production affects their ability to do abstract categorizations. And that's part of the sort of the general project of investigating the relationship between language and abstract thought. My work is really a response to a group of discussions that were happening in the late 70s through early, 90s between people like Daniel Dennett and Jerry Fodor and Fred Dretske and Sidney Shoemaker, Paul Churchland. All these folks were sort of, debating the big issues about consciousness and intentionality of mental states and how to understand the relationship of the mind to the brain. Those are the conversations I'm still sort of responding to, but, I think these days a lot of these debates have taken a narrower focus. So now I'm kind of looking at these more individual mental states or processes or abilities like imagination, like inner speech or memory, trying to investigate those sort of in relative isolation with all those broader debates in the background informing the way we approach these topics. Well, it's hard not to be astounded by contemporary AI. And so I've already worked a bit on AI in some of my work, in particular on thinking about the nature of creativity and the nature of imagination and comparing human creativity to the kind of apparent creativity we see in contemporary generative AI. So I'm looking forward to getting deeper into those things. I'm working on those things right now. Really just seeing what we can learn about ourselves by reflecting on the way AI shows a capacity for things like creativity and imagination. So there's lots of things that are special about us here at UC. Some of the most salient things are how it's a welcoming place. It's a place where we encourage people to sort of take on different kinds of philosophical topics. We encourage grad students to pursue other degrees even while they're here, such as master's degrees. We've had people doing master's degrees in psychology, in AI, in counseling, in criminal justice. Well, I think the best way to figure that out is to take a look at what the faculty members are working on, see if that excites you, see if that interests you, and then also look at the kinds of other resources we have at UC. There are other centers that are affiliated with the department, whether it's the Cincinnati Ethics Center, which a lot of our graduate students work with them on different projects. There's also the Philosophy of Science Association that's housed here, where some of our students work with them and helping to coordinate their events. There's also the Center for Public Engagement with Science. There's the Institute for Research and Sensing. There's a variety of institutes here and centers at UC that our graduate students get involved in. And if those kinds of projects seem exciting to you and something you'd like to be a part of, I think that's a sign that you would have a good experience here and be a good fit for the program. So my favorite philosophy course in grad school wasn't really a course. It was a weekly symposium called the Cognitive Science Symposium, run by David Rosenthal. And we would have weekly meetings where they would bring in, often a researcher, local or sometimes a visiting researcher, give a talk, and then we would have a very long discussion session after the talk. But we also, when we had down weeks, we would have an opportunity for grad students to present at this symposium. And it was a brutal experience for a grad students presenting because it was a no-holds-barred type of audience there. No one was going to give you an inch, especially if you were an early graduate student trying to prove yourself. And these discussion periods would go on for an hour and a half to 2 hours. And definitely some of the most difficult audiences I ever had. But you knew at the end of it, if people gave you any sort of compliment whatsoever, that you had done something worth doing. So those were really memorable and enjoyable time. Well, it's tough to say. Between my undergraduate degree and my graduate degree in philosophy, I was a musician or a semi-professional musician. I was in a band called Elk City, and we had indie label releases, and we did some tours of Europe and the United States. I was at another job that was in that pretty seriously for a while. I would probably still be trying to pursue music in some way, whether it be recording other people, making music. Maybe I'd be a roadie. It's tough to say, but I might be involved in music in some way or other if I weren't doing this. The Coen brothers are my favorite directors of movies. Of theirs, probably either Barton Fink or The Big Lebowski are my favorites. Writers, a couple people that come to mind, Cormac McCarthy and Blood Meridian and The Road are both, incredible novels, kinds of things I can read and read sentences over and over again and just wonder where they came from. Richard Ford is another favorite writer. His book Independence Day, which I read not long ago, I really enjoyed. So there you go.